Now, travel's also tricky these days, whether it's cancelled flights, train strikes or the soaring cost of petrol and diesel. Chancellor Rishi Sunak's coming under increasing pressure to cut fuel duty or face a summer of chaos on the roads, because yesterday protesters took to motorways in a slow drive demonstration across many parts of the country, and it could be the first of many. Joining me now is Howard Cox. He is founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign. Howard, we meet again, we talk again. It's the same old subject, the cost of fuel.
I know, Liam, it's good to be on your show, my friend. Yeah, what we're seeing now is law-abiding citizens, decent people, truck drivers. These people are at the end of their tether and they're protesting and they're shouting at the government, listen to us, reduce the price of fuel before it gets even more crippling. If you don't do it soon, there's going to be a lot more protests, and some of these protests could get even more serious.
Now, we should say, as I always do when I talk to you, Howard, whether it's here on the Briefing, Glorious Show, my own show, On the Money, here on GBNews, which will follow in the next hour, you are partly funded by the Road Haulage Association. You're always open about that. But you have, over many months now, unearthed some really interesting figures, which are just objectively true, on the extent to which petrol and diesel prices are rising, even when the cost of oil, crude oil, is falling. To what extent do you think ministers are taking that seriously, the idea that we are being made to endure unfair increases in the cost of fuel on the forecourts, that the big petrol retailers, rather than the small independent ones, are taking advantage of an inflationary environment to push up those prices unduly?
Well, bluntly, the ministers are in cloud cuckoo land. They're not listening at all. It's ridiculous. When you see Germany cutting fuel duty by 25 pence, France 13, Ireland 17 and Spain 20 pence, they're getting on top of this, and they recognise the cost of living crisis is not just a phrase that's thrown around all the time glibly by people. I was on a show this morning, just after Dominic Raab, and he said, we're doing lots of good stuff. We're pumping 37 billion into the economy to make sure we help people feeling the pinch, which is a bit of, shouldn't use pincher, sorry, pinch. But from the point of view of actually what people are actually feeling at the pumps, this is debilitating, it's crippling. The haulage industry, as you quite rightly pointed out, the road haulage industry have backed Fair Fuel UK for 11 years, and their members are suffering terribly. And the impact of what it's costing them is something like 50 to 60% of their costs are fuel. What's happening to them is they have trying to pass those prices on down through the product supply chain all the way to shops, etc. But some of them aren't being able to do that because some of their customers aren't taking those price increases because they can't sell anything anymore. So the whole thing is simple. Cut the costs to the industry, cut the costs to business, and most importantly, cut the costs to drivers and small and hard-pressed small families.
The trouble is, though, Howard, you know this better than me, that as the cost of fuel goes up on the forecourt, VAT is a fixed percentage of that fuel. So the rising cost of fuel, it's a cash cow for the government, isn't it? Even if the percentage of tax stays the same, the actual amount of money they get in from motorists, from hauliers, from people trying to keep the economy on the move goes up and up and up. So ministers have every incentive, don't they, to leave things as they are. How are we going to change that?
Yeah, but that's not a popular approach, is it? Because you're absolutely right. You hit it right on the head, my friend. 3 billion to 4 billion of extra VAT has been generated in the last year alone. That's extra VAT. They've also got a 5 billion bonanza windfall tax they're getting from the high profits of oil companies. That's nearly 10 billion of cash washing about. That is even more than the 20p we're calling for a cut in fuel duty. And the most important thing about this is because that 5p cut we got back in March didn't touch the size. They need to police anything they do if they cut fuel duty, and they need to introduce pump watch. As you know, I've been banging on about pump watch with Robert Alphen MP for the last 3 to 4 years. And unfortunately, this government doesn't seem to be in touch with reality. The only good thing they've done is because the 5p cut in fuel duty wasn't passed on, they've introduced or asked the Competitions and Market Authority to inquire into where that fuel duty cut went, what happened to it. But they need to go even deeper because this opportunistic monopolistic profiteering further up the fuel supply chain. And you quite rightly point out the small independent retailers, they're not making much margin. It's definitely further up the fuel supply chain with oil companies and big wholesalers and speculators.
Howard, I'd like to say it's always a pleasure, but it isn't, my friend. It isn't a pleasure talking endlessly about these things, but it is a necessary distraction from normal life. We need to keep pressing. We need to keep highlighting the extent of that tax take on fuel, on petrol and diesel. Howard Cox there of the Fair Fuel UK campaign. Thanks for joining us.